We are here on a Sunday, emergency podcast edition of Marco D'Amico and Shaun Starr with you. Why are we here on a Sunday interrupting our NFL action? Marco had to take a business class trip back home from Nashville. He had to stop his business and say, hey, I've got a podcast to record because bleep's about to hit the fan. To be overly dramatic. That's not really how it played itself out. Marco was in Nashville, but I'm exaggerating to make a point. Why? Because Evgeni Malkin in a Montreal Canadiens jersey, Marco, not just a dream, there's real buzz. At least I think there is. And today we break down how Montreal could make a blockbuster trade happen. What's that Drake meme? Wired, what's live, what's good, what isn't good, Crosby stale. Malkin is the new buzz. Let's take you to rg.org and the latest published by Jimmy Murphy that came out just Saturday with the question that's asked off the hop. Could both Pittsburgh Penguins captain Sidney Crosby and veteran center Evgeni Malkin both finish the upcoming season with different teams? Marco D'Amico, good to see your face again. Let's break this latest drama around the Pittsburgh Penguins organization. What do you make of this?
I mean, listen, I don't necessarily, the information that we've gotten at RG is that the Penguins aren't shopping Crosby. They aren't shopping Malkin specifically because they have no movement clauses, right? And they're not there yet. They firmly believe, the players I speak, not the management team, firmly believe that they still have a shot at this and making a competitive team and making the playoffs. They still feel like they do. So no one's given up anything. But I think it's kind of understood in Pittsburgh that this is Malkin's last year. Whether it's his last year in the NHL or not will be thoroughly dependent on his play, right? Because obviously there was a dip in play from last year to this year. Yeah. So we have to see exactly how much of a start he gets off. So what we were told is Montreal was one of the three teams identified to us from a source close to the situation. And when I mean the situation, I don't mean on the Canadian side. That told us that the Montreal Canadiens, Tampa Bay Lightning, and Florida Panthers were three of the teams that inquired on the availability of Evgeni Malkin. Now, I do want to be clear on this. This does not mean anything is imminent. I was one of the first people that said this. Now I think it's become a league-wide thing where GMs have kind of told reporters now that this is what they expect. But the idea is because the market was so dry this summer, the expectation is that things are going to shake loose around American Thanksgiving and right before the roster freeze in mid-December. And so a lot of teams are getting their shopping lists ready now and identifying key trade targets so that when the time comes, they are ready because they want to be part of that conversation right away.
Let's hear from Evgeni Malkin himself here. He spoke at length after practice as training camp is obviously well underway. Don't forget, everyone loves being a part of a journey, right? We've busted through the 10,000 subscriber threshold. Let's get to 20K. Let's get to 20K. Let's be a part of this journey together. D'Amico and Starr with you as we climb to the 20K subscription threshold. Now, with training camp underway, I remind you that D'Amico and Starr will be with you a Tuesday morning at 11 a.m. for a complete reaction to the Penguins and Canadiens preseason opener for the Habs live from the Bell Center. Now, let's get back to Evgeni Malkin. The Canadiens, are they sniffing around one of the NHL's biggest stars? Could Malkin actually be on his way? How many teams? You heard the list that Marco mentioned. Evgeni Malkin weighs in.
He doesn't know what's going on, during the season, if something happened, I hope not. I hope I stay here, C10, and be Penguins forever for sure. And again, I hope we play great, and I hope everything going perfect, and perfect myself too. I won't stay here for sure.
So no surprise. I mean, Malkin saying what Crosby has said, that they in a perfect world they'd love to be Penguins for life, but missing the playoffs 3 years in a row. Especially, even though, Marco, you've won multiple Stanley Cups, watching on TV as a pro athlete is no fun. I totally understand where Malkin's coming from, having one foot in the Penguins organization while also perhaps not shutting the door on possibilities. That's my read on this. Expand more on Malkin's comments.
It sounded just like Brad Marchand's comments last year.
Right.
And look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Brad Marchand could have stayed at Boston Bruin. And even after being traded, the Boston Bruins were ready to make an offer to him if he were to hit free agency. So it's not like these things are, set in stone and you kind of follow a template. Like, it's messy. It really is messy when you get to this stage in a player's career. They have a no movement clause. Their team's going one way, they're going another. You need to make a call, right? And so when you look at the Brad Marchand situation, the situation in Boston eventually led to them wanting to retool. And so if you're Brad Marchand, you see them trading Brandon Carlo. There were talks of potentially moving out Pavel Zacha at the time. Boston underwent a couple of nice trades there where they, Charlie Coyle was moved. And so it made sense to move Brad Marchand at that point because they hadn't come to terms on money. Now, whether or not, the Bruins were a little stingy on the offer that they were making for Marchand at the time, I think that's what led to eventually them agreeing to cut ties and create a trade. I don't think you're in the same boat here with Evgeni Malkin because this isn't a player, in my honest opinion, that's got, 3 more years like Brad Marchand, right? Like, Evgeni Malkin cannot play a third line role, in my honest opinion. Whereas Brad Marchand, that's how he started his career. He has a perfect style to, in his later years, just kind of establish himself on a high-end third line or a really good second line for the Florida Panthers for the next couple of years. Malkin, I think, is maybe a year or two more at the can. And then I think, he'll probably want to retire in Russia, as he said so many times. So if you're trading for a Malkin, you're probably trading for a rental. And I think that's where the Canadiens, really kind of like looked in the situation, asked the question, and wanted to see what was going on because, we're going to talk about Malkin, but we're eventually going to talk about the elephant in the room and why Malkin then becomes possibly viable.
So let's talk about whether or not the Canadiens should they have interest in Evgeni Malkin. Before we get to that question and that answer, you talk about Brad Marchand as perhaps the example. Why not? It's the dream scenario. No tax state that you flip into becoming a Stanley Cup champ. Evgeni Malkin, sometimes we look at these athletes. Do they read the papers? Do they listen to the radio? Are they watching the NHL news? The answer is yes for Evgeni Malkin.
It's hard, but again, we see like a story like with Brett Marchand, it's looking good, but again, like if you team trade you and you not win cup, it's like a little bit weird too, but again, like we see what's going on. It's on future, but of course everybody wants to try play playoffs and maybe one more round to cup, but again, it's a great story when you see on TV, but I don't know how I feel if team wants to trade me.
So again, there's the man himself bringing up Brad Marchand's name, which takes me to the path that believes that Montreal is not a realistic landing spot for Evgeni Malkin. As much as I think, Marco, him being a role model, I get the gimme putt that everyone puts together. A role model to Ivan Demidov. I get the symmetry there. It makes all the sense in the world. These guys, their mother tongue is Russian. They can communicate. There's a relatability there. But ultimately, you use the word rental player. When I think about Evgeni Malkin as a rental, I don't think the Canadiens are in the business. I can look at Tampa Bay as perhaps in the business. I don't know if Florida has the cap flexibility or maneuverability to make it happen, but Montreal's at the bottom of the list from the teams that Jimmy Murphy cited in his RG.org piece. I mean, that's the read there. What do you make of him invoking Brad Marchand's name and connecting that to the Canadiens and whether or not that makes sense?
We had this conversation with Sidney Crosby, and I'm going to reiterate the exact same thing I said. You have these guys on no movement clause.
Yeah.
You heard it from the horse's mouth. It's a risky business to want to leave your legacy to go and win a cup, because if you don't win that cup, man, does it look funny, right? And I think that's kind of the risk reward situation here. And Malkin recognizes it because he's willing to talk about it openly. Sidney Crosby does not, right? Because he doesn't want to talk about it openly. But the reality of the fact is those two guys, if they do leave, are going to pick their spots.
Mm-hmm.
And the Canadiens have shown interest early, not by chance, because they believe that they could be one of the best teams in the East this year. And we talked about this. This is all going to be situational, right? The Florida Panthers don't go as aggressively as they did if they didn't feel like they could repeat, after that Seth Jones trade that they made. And I feel like the same applies in this situation. The Montreal Canadiens would only be that aggressive if Kirby Dach didn't work out and they were still a very, very, very competitive team that had one major need. And I think that's where you start piecing it together, right? Because there is value in being that up-and-comer team that that gets people excited and that gets players excited, because you're like, well, if I join them, where do I go? Right? I put myself in the player's shoes. You want to go to a contender. You want to go to a team that already has shown experience in being that top level team that has a legitimate shot at the cup. I don't think that anybody thinks that any addition that the Canadiens could make at any deadline without like multiple trades would put them at the top of the list in terms of contenders, even if they traded for Crosby. And I apologize if that takes a couple of people.
Well, we've disagreed on that in a previous episode. I mean, I don't want to dig in on it, but we see it a little bit differently.
The same applies to Malkin.
I agree.
The same applies to Malkin. Now, the only way this could work out is the off-season, or sorry, the playoff salary cap. And I think that's where things get interesting. You look at a team like the Tampa Bay Lightning, their playoff salary cap, they're strapped. They are absolutely strapped. Unless they trade Bjorkstrand, who is at, I believe, $5.4 million for one more year to make a room, they're strapped. So it would have to be a money in, money out deal, which Pittsburgh would then ask for more money, or sorry, for more assets from a team like Tampa. Montreal, it's money in, right? Because it's 20 players that you count. It's the 20 players you dress that you count. So the Montreal Canadiens could easily have, a high-playing player sit out and fit within their 20-man playoff cap structure, but a team like Florida cannot. A team like Tampa Bay cannot. So the list of contenders becomes smaller because the rules have changed, and that's where Montreal has a potential advantage. And that's what I've heard from Montreal is that they feel like now that they've removed Carey Price from the equation, they have in-season flexibility and off-season flexibility, because obviously LTIR does not count in the playoffs. So there's a little bit of room to go there. And then the other thing is they have the assets to make a trade.
Yes.
The Florida Panthers and the Tampa Bay Lightning went ham last year and every other year for practically the last 5 years in making trades to improve their team today. So I don't know that they would have a lot that would entice a team like Pittsburgh. Tampa, maybe, Connor Geekie. Florida, maybe Maki Samoskevich. But like after that, and you got to make the money work too. So like, again, this is why I think about these things from time to time, and I see what these teams are doing. And I feel like Montreal has the kind of assets that can make it happen. And the idea that they inquired about Malkin, I mean, let's call it spade to spade. They inquired about both, right? They wanted to see what was going on with Crosby, what was going on with Malkin. And I could confirm that Tampa Bay did the exact same thing, by the way. Tampa Bay has been scouring the league to try and make a bomb for a while now. And so they looked in on Crosby, they looked in on Malkin. Like teams are setting lists. This is basically what it is. Because when we're gonna get to, late November, early December, things are gonna shake loose again. Like we saw last year, but with a little bit more aggressiveness.
One more from Malkin I want to get your reaction to.
We didn't talk yet, but it's again, like I think we have time, long season, training camp just start and we see what's going on, and like again, huge season for Kyle, for everybody here. It's like we missed playoffs last 3 years. It's not great, but again, like now my focus, like be better every day, stay here like with team, do my best. And we see if like, guys, if like my last year here, I have 20 years play here, it's like not bad too, and I'm glad be Penguins. I'm glad win 3 Stanley Cups here, But again, if I have a chance to play next year, I'm good.
I mean, that's a proud guy talking right there. I love that he talked a big year for Kyle as general manager, and to me, it everything seems very consistent, Marco. Like the reporting from the Athletic, Shaun Gentili talking about Crosby's not leaving until the Malkin case is solved. They're talking about the competitive window for the Pittsburgh Penguins, that Malkin is more or less saying the same message. At least that's what I hear, is that let's see how the season plays out. Whatever if it's American Thanksgiving, if it's Christmas, if it's the Olympic break, whatever the marker is that these guys are going to look at and say, where are we in the competitive landscape? To me, no one has shut the door on a possible seismic move. What your reaction to Malkin looking at his Penguins and being a proud Penguin? Let's not kid ourselves here.
Absolutely, as he should. I mean, his iteration of the Pittsburgh Penguins won more cups than Mario's, right? Like, and it's not like Mario didn't have help either with the Jagers and the Francises of this world. So, it's same to say, like, they are the flagship of that franchise now. They are their statues will be erected outside of the PPG Saints Arena. Like, it's obvious. I understand, but as we talked about earlier, this is all circumstantial.
Yeah.
I don't think that Brad Marchand gets traded from Boston if Boston's a playoff team, right? He may have walked into free agency, but I don't think he would have been dealt if they were in a playoff situation and not looking to sell, right?
Yeah.
So it's all situational, and the same applies to Pittsburgh. The one thing we know, though, about Pittsburgh is that they're actively not making their team better. In the immediate term, they're looking long term. Sure. And so if that's the idea and that's the case, and you're looking to eventually offload guys like Raquel, you're looking at Brian Rust now that is movable now that his clause has changed. Like, there are a lot of guys in Pittsburgh that are drawing interest, and there is a significant feeling that they're going to offload quite a few of them. And so if that's the case, and the vision is for them was always that they were open to rebuild even at the draft, then the writing's kind of on the wall. Yes, you have to play the season, but this team hasn't improved in any way. So unless Crosby and Malkin go God mode, what are you? The prophecy is there. Like, they're probably going to miss the playoffs again, probably going to be a bottom 10, some could argue bottom 3 team, and the decisions will have to be made. And I think at that point, like you just said it, they have pride. These are proud athletes. You're asking some of the best players in history to go out in a whimper. I just don't see that. These are too competitive of people. And this is me speculating. This is what I know. The Pittsburgh Penguins have said not yet.
Correct.
And that's all you need to know.
Just wait.
Them saying not yet, the players saying we'll see. I think the writing is on the wall here. Teams are setting up their lists, setting up alternatives, plan A, B, C, and D. And if you're the Montreal Canadiens, maybe the fact that Evgeni Malkin isn't sure if he can play next year fits into this discussion as well, right? Do you value the later year of this last year of Malkin? Because let's be honest here, he's going to cost you much less than a Sidney Crosby trade.
Oh yeah, all day.
Like, I know that the comments are going to be littered. Bah, Crosby.
Yeah, yes. Of course.
So will the couple of teams on his list, including watch out for the Tampa Bay Lightning and the LA Kings. Right. So like all of these guys are all of these teams are gonna be there. Crosby's gonna be the golden goose, and then Evgeni Malkin, given his situation, given his play, will dictate his price point, right? Because if he replicates the same season he had last year, I don't think he's gonna go, especially with a no movement clause. I don't think he's gonna go for a very rich return, maybe a conditional second like Brad Marchand that turns into a first, or a first from a team that knows they're going to be picking late 20s, early 30s. But other than that, he would have to have a much better season. So that's the kind of discussion to be had, because if you strike out on first of all, we'll start it at the base of this conversation. If Kirby Dach does not live up to the hype,
exactly,
is number one. Right? Because we keep talking about looking for a 2C, but this is all simply insurance policies for 2 reasons. Number one, Canadians have to see what's going on with Dach. Number 2, the Canadians feel strongly that Michael Hayes will be a top 6 center. So you simply have to bridge the gap.
Yeah.
And that's where they're looking at it. Fans have been asking for Mason McTavish all summer. Pat Verbeek has given everybody the bird whenever they've asked about McTavish. I can tell you this. So this is that's a pipe dream in terms of, like, teams would love it, but it's not happening.
Well, it sounds like that door's closed now. So if it ever was open,
but offer sheets were possible all summer.
Yes.
And McTavish's camp didn't want to know nothing about it. So,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, they're not there. So
Well,
it's just a tough negotiation. That's it. But you're going to need a situational occurrence like the Dobson situation where the stars align, you have the assets, that player wants to come play for you, and a trade is made. And I feel like the Montreal Canadiens would rather bring in a piece that could help this team get to the next level and give Michael Hage a little bit of time. And so I only feel like the Canadiens would be aggressive in pulling the trigger on a guy like Malkin if they're sure that he could play again next year and for them.
Or the door is just never open for Sidney Crosby, and 87 will be a Penguin for life. Because, I wanted to go through the timeline, and yes, I would have Doc number one, as let's see what happens with Kirby Doc's season, how he progresses as they integrate him back into the mix, and whether he can stay in the mix as the 2C behind Nick Suzuki, right? But in the best case, he does that. And in the even better case, the Montreal Canadiens have turned into a juggernaut. Everybody plays well. They produce really well. They're a top 3 team for a large chunk of the season. That's another scenario where I could see where they're like, you know what? Everybody gets bumped down because they can they could add a significant talent, whether it's a rental or even in a dream scenario, they could poach Sidney Crosby out of the Pittsburgh Penguins. So to me, my last thing here is whether you and I talked, and we did in the summer, about Mason McTavish. Last week, we talked about Kirill Kaprizov in Minnesota, saying no to Bill Guerin and close to $130 million, right? We've spoken at length about Crosby. Here we are speaking about, you okay? Watch that funny elbow. And now here we are, you and I, spending over 20 minutes talking about Evgeni Malkin. You know what the commonality, the takeaway is for me? Small trades? I don't know, man. It looks like the Montreal Canadiens might be positioning themselves, if everything goes right, brother, for a big trade, not a small trade. That's my read on the names we've speculated on, and here we are now wrapping it up with Evgeni Malkin. They're looking, perhaps, in the best case, they do well, they can land a big one.
So I feel like, the Canadiens have to prove themselves first.
Agreed.
That last year was not a fluke, not only,
Correct.
but they then have to prove that they can take another step again.
They're plus money by Vegas odds makers to make the playoffs, eh? They're like plus 105 last I looked. So
yeah, I think Vegas is pissed off at Montreal dating back to the 2021 playoffs. Because there were a lot of people in Vegas that lost money. We're talking about millions of dollars in that series because it was perceived to be such a shoehorn kind of easy flight to the finals, right? It should have been Tampa versus Vegas, but no. So with that said, what I would kind of bring back to the situation is more the Canadiens really have to take that step before you can convince anybody with a clause to come play for Montreal. I don't care that they were your favorite team growing up. You need that level of performance to show that they're not going to waste their time leaving their legacy behind to come try to win a cup with you, right? No one's going to do you favors in this league. Emotions have never played into it. No superstar that has grown up a Montreal Canadien ever turned around with a no movement clause and said, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go to Montreal because they were my childhood team. Like it doesn't matter. You have to be a desirable team, right? That's why Noah Dobson took a less to come to Montreal and pushed his way literally to Montreal because he liked the vibe. He grew up a Canadiens fan, sure, but he liked the vibe. He wanted to be part of that team, not because of the C on the crest, but because of the team in the locker room, because of where the organization is going. It just so happened that he was also a fan of that team growing up. The same needs to be said to a higher degree when it comes to a guy like Crosby. And so if you do miss out on a guy like Crosby and you have reached that point, a guy like Evgeni Malkin is a very good consolation prize, and you could slot him quite easily with Ivan Demidov. And then you see during the playoffs, if he likes the feel of Montreal, we've seen a guy like Jeff Petrie be brought in as a rental and re-sign.
For sure.
Same can apply here.
Yeah. And even, Noah Dobson was, at camp and speaking to reporters on the Daily, talking about how he's shocked how tight this group is. And to me, that's, hockey is such a team-centric sport. To me, it is a priority to get these guys to be this tight. That's not an easy thing to do. So they've accomplished some big monumental tasks, making the playoffs, having a group that's bonded well together where they can bring in a guy like Noah Dobson and their symmetry kind of right off the bat. And you hope that all of those things add up to dividends, and that would be playoffs and playoff rounds and playoff games won. Marco D'Amico, thank you so much for getting off a plane and getting right into your home studio. I know the fans certainly appreciate that, and our subscribers, no doubt, as well, as we march towards 20,000. So you from day one have always been a part of the journey. So let's keep this mama on the tracks. And as always, you can support us by supporting our sponsors like Little Bear, littlebearonline.com, delivery, curbside pickup, month-long specials that change as the seasons go by. You can have a look at some of your favorite brands. They got stuffies with like beer can brands or coffee house brands and stuff like that. They got great prices on a great selection. It's a family-owned business that loves your pet as much as you do. You got questions about nutrition, they don't pass the buck. They dive deep because they have the knowledge and they care about your pet. So Little Bear, littlebearonline.com on St. Catherine in Westmount, across from Alexis Neon Plaza. And I remind you here again, Marco, not that you need reminding, but we'll be here Tuesday morning at 11 a.m. for instant reaction, more or less, after the Habs and Penguins let the season begin. Marco D'Amico, thanks as always, and we'll see you live Tuesday.
See everybody on Tuesday.